Daniel Carter thought the hospital had only denied his little girl's file until the CFO, Victor Harlan, offered him $5,000 to sign a statement saying the missing documents were his fault. But Daniel refused because inside his late wife's faded blue notebook was one code North Star Medical Center never expected him to understand. At first, it looked like a desperate father fighting a denied assistance form. Then a retired nurse recognized the code. A doctor found a deleted attachment log, and a local reporter noticed that several families had been marked incomplete in almost the exact same way. What makes this case disturbing is not that North Star said no to Grace Carter. It is that someone may have built a quiet system where families disappeared on paper before they ever reached the people meant to help them. And when Daniel finally opened that notebook in a public hearing room, Victor's face revealed the one thing his reports could not hide. Victor Harlan did not recognize Daniel Carter at first. He recognized the notebook. It sat under the white lights of North Star Medical Center's hearing room, faded blue, worn at the corners, tied shut with a ribbon that looked like it came from a child's birthday gift. 6 months earlier, Victor had dismissed that same notebook as emotional material. Not evidence, not proof, not anything that could stand against reports, signatures, budgets, and official files. Now the room was full. Donors sat stiffly in the front rows. Nurses stood along the walls. Local reporters had cameras pointed at the stage. Families who had spent months fighting rejected forms and unanswered calls waited in silence, all because one father had asked a question North Star did not want to answer. Why had Grace Carter's complete assistance file been marked incomplete? Daniel Carter stood beside the table in a plain blue work shirt. No expensive suit, no legal team, no polished speech in a folder. His 9-year-old daughter, Grace, sat the front row with both hands folded in her lap. In front of him was his wife's handwriting, and inside that handwriting was something Victor's clean reports had failed to bury. 6 months earlier, Daniel was not a headline. He was the maintenance technician people called when something stopped working at North Star. A monitor battery failed, Daniel came. A hospital bed got stuck, Daniel came. A warming cabinet stopped heating at 2 a.m, Daniel came with a tool bag, tired eyes, and coffee in a paper cup. Most people only noticed him when they needed him. To the executive floor, he was not a father, a widower, or a man with 11 years of quiet service. He was a contract line. The trouble began on a cold Tuesday morning in February, inside North Star's patient financial services office. Daniel sat beside Grace while a woman behind the glass typed her name into the system. Grace held a purple backpack against her knees and a folded drawing of a house with blue windows. Daniel had brought every document they asked for: pay stubs, rent receipts, tax forms, insurance letters, a school counselor note, and a medical priority letter from Dr. Lena Ortiz. Grace needed care Daniel could not afford alone. North Star's Children's Bridge Fund was supposed to help families exactly like his. Daniel knew the fund existed because his wife, Mara, had once helped families apply for it. She kept names, case numbers, phone calls, and strange delays inside a faded blue notebook. After Mara was gone, Daniel kept that notebook wrapped in a dish towel, not knowing it would one day matter more than any file North Star controlled. The woman behind the glass was not cruel. That almost made it worse. She looked tired, like she had given bad news too many times. When she slid the papers through the slot, Daniel saw the word beside Grace's name, incomplete. He looked up. Incomplete how? I brought everything on the list. The woman glanced at the screen. The system does not show enough available support under the Children's Bridge Fund for this case. Daniel stared at her. That is not the same as incomplete. She lowered her voice. Mr. Carter, I can only tell you what the system says. There it was, the system. Not a person, not a name, not someone Daniel could question. Just the system, spoken like a wall nobody had built and nobody was responsible for moving. Grace looked up from her chair and asked, Daddy, did we forget something? Daniel folded the denial letter carefully and said, No, baby. We brought everything. If you have ever seen an ordinary person treated like a problem just because they did not have enough money, stay with this story. And if stories about quiet people fighting back matter to you, take a second to subscribe. Because what happened to Daniel Carter was not just about one denied form. It was about what happens when powerful people use polite words to push families out. After Daniel dropped Grace at school, he went back to North Star alone. Maybe he should have waited. Maybe he should have sent an email and followed the proper steps. But the word incomplete was sitting beside his daughter's name, and Daniel knew it was false. By late morning, he stood outside Conference Room B with the denial letter in his hand and Mara's blue notebook inside his backpack. Inside sat Victor Harlan, North Star's chief financial officer. Victor was known for clean reports, calm meetings, and a voice so controlled it made other people feel unreasonable for disagreeing. He looked at Daniel's work shirt, worn shoes, and folded denial letter. In less than 5 seconds, he had already decided what kind of man Daniel was. "Mr. Carter," Victor said, "we understand this is emotional for you." That sentence was the first insult, though it did not sound like one. Daniel had not cried, shouted, or threatened anyone. He had asked why a complete file had been marked incomplete. But Victor called it emotional because that made the question easier to dismiss. Daniel placed the denial letter on the table. "I am not asking for emotion. I am asking who removed documents from my daughter's file." For the first time, the room changed. The HR woman stopped writing. The communications director looked up from her laptop. Victor's face stayed calm, but his eyes sharpened just enough for Daniel to notice. Victor folded his hands. "You are a contract maintenance employee, Mr. Carter. You do not have authority to challenge patient finance determinations." Daniel held his ground. "I am her father. And that is why," Victor said softly, "you should be careful." Then HR slid a document across the table. Daniel saw his name at the top, and beneath it were words he had never agreed to: disruptive conduct, boundary violation, misuse of employee access. The paper had been prepared before he ever walked into the room. That was when Daniel understood the denial was only the beginning. He had entered that room as a father asking for a review. North Star had already decided to turn him into a problem, and in the next part, they would offer him $5,000 to sign away the truth. So stay with the story, and make sure you are subscribed, because this is where a quiet man learns that the first thing powerful people try to take from you is not always your job or your money. Sometimes it is your right to say what really happened. Daniel looked at the paper on the table for a long moment before touching it. His name was printed at the top, clean and official, as if the truth had already been decided before he walked in. The document said he had entered a restricted area without permission. It said he had created discomfort among staff. It said he had used his employee access for a personal matter. None of that was true, but the language was calm enough to make a lie look responsible. The HR woman, Allison Pierce, folded her hands and spoke like she was offering him a favor. "Daniel, if you sign this acknowledgement, we can close the matter respectfully. North Star is prepared to offer a transition payment of $5,000. $5,000. Daniel knew exactly what that number meant. It meant 2 months of rent if he stretched every grocery trip. It meant the electric bill could stop sitting on the kitchen table like a warning. It meant Grace could have new shoes, a warm coat, and maybe 1 week where he did not check his bank app before buying milk. For a man with less than $300 in his account, $5,000 was not small. Victor watched him carefully. "This is a generous offer, Mr. Carter. It gives you a chance to move forward." Daniel read the page again. The words were neat, but they were not harmless. If he signed it, North Star could say he admitted fault. If he signed it, Grace's file would remain incomplete on paper. If he signed it, Mara's notebook would become nothing more than a sad family object no one had to take seriously. He looked at Victor. "You want me to say I caused a problem?" Victor's expression did not move. "You did cause a problem." "No," Daniel said quietly. "I asked a question." The room went still. Paige Keller, the communications director, stopped typing. Allison's eyes dropped toward the document. Victor leaned back a little, almost disappointed, as if Daniel had failed some test of common sense.
"You should think about your daughter,"
Victor said. Daniel's jaw tightened. That was the second insult. Not the words themselves, but the way Victor used Grace like a button he could press. Daniel did think about his daughter. He thought about her in the morning when he packed her lunch. He thought about her every time she paused on the stairs to catch her breath. He thought about her when he counted coins at the grocery store. That was exactly why he could not put his name on a false paper. "I am thinking about her," Daniel said. "That is why I am not signing." Victor's polite face turned colder. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Then North Star will end your contract effective immediately. Your badge access will be closed. You will return any property belonging to the hospital. And we will document today's incident accordingly." Daniel stood there for 1 second longer than they expected. He did not argue. He did not beg. He took the denial letter, folded it once, and placed it back inside his folder. Then he picked up Mara's blue notebook from his backpack and held it against his chest like something alive. Victor glanced at it.
"Personal items do not change policy, Mr. Carter."
Daniel looked at him. No, but sometimes they remember what policy tries to forget. Security met him outside the conference room. The guard's name was Carl. Daniel had fixed Carl's mother's old walker once in the employee parking lot, tightening the loose screw with a pocket tool while Carl kept saying he would pay him back. Now Carl could not look him in the eye. "I'm sorry, man," Carl whispered. Daniel nodded because he knew Carl had rent too. The walk through the lobby felt longer than any hallway Daniel had ever crossed. Nurses looked up from the coffee stand. A woman from billing turned away too quickly. 2 younger employees whispered near the elevators. Daniel kept his eyes forward, one hand on his folder, the other on the blue notebook under his jacket. Outside the glass doors, cold rain had started to fall, turning the sidewalk silver. At the curb, Carl handed him a brown envelope. Final pay, contract ending notice, confidentiality reminder. It was all there, stacked and stapled, as if his 11 years could fit inside one envelope. Daniel stepped out from under the hospital canopy and checked his phone. There was a message from Grace's school nurse. Grace had a tired spell after recess. "Resting now. Please call when you can." For a moment, Daniel could not move. Behind him, through the second-floor glass, Victor Harlan stood at the railing and watched. To Victor, the matter was finished. A troublesome contractor had been removed. A false paper had been refused, but the file would show enough to protect North Star. The man had no money, no title, no access, and no one powerful standing behind him. Daniel put the phone in his pocket and walked toward the bus stop. He had lost his job before lunch. By dinner, he would learn that North Star had also marked him not eligible for rehire. By the next morning, 2 repair jobs he had been counting on would quietly disappear after the clients checked his reference. The system had not only denied Grace's file, it had begun closing doors around her father. And Victor believed that was the end of it. Daniel did not tell Grace the whole truth when he picked her up from school. He told her there had been a hard meeting. He told her he would be home more for a little while. He told her they were having grilled cheese for dinner, because grilled cheese cut into triangles felt more special than regular grilled cheese. Grace nodded like she believed him. But children can hear the spaces between words better than adults think. Their apartment sat on the second floor of a brick building off Hull Street, above a tax office with faded posters in the window. The hallway smelled like old carpet, fried onions, and rainwater tracked in from the street. Inside, the radiator knocked against the wall every few minutes, and the refrigerator made a clicking sound Daniel had been ignoring for 2 weeks. Mara used to say the apartment was small but honest. She liked the kitchen window because it caught morning light. That night, Grace fell asleep on the couch with her purple backpack beside her and one sock halfway off. Daniel sat at the kitchen table with the brown envelope from North Star, the denial letter, and his banking app open on his phone. Available balance:
$286.
14. Rent was due in 9 days. The electric bill was already late. His van needed an alternator. The refrigerator clicked again, paused, and clicked harder. Beside the bills sat Mara's blue notebook, still wrapped in a dish towel. Daniel had not opened it in weeks. Some objects become heavy when the person who used them is no longer there. Mara had carried that notebook everywhere during her community clinic days. She wrote down names, dates, Bus routes, phone extensions, wrong codes, missed callbacks, and little details nobody important seemed to track. Mrs. Clay needs large print. Santos family has no car on Tuesdays. Ask about bridge fund code BF17. Daniel opened it slowly. The pages smelled faintly like old paper and the lavender hand lotion Mara used to keep in her bag. Grace had tucked drawings between the pages over the years. Houses with blue windows, a hospital bed with a yellow sun, 3 stick figures holding hands under a tree. On the inside cover, Mara had written, "No family should have to apologize for needing help." Daniel ran his thumb over the sentence. He had read it many times, but that night it felt less like a memory and more like an instruction. The next morning, the pressure became practical. His supervisor texted that he was no longer eligible for North Star assignments. A contractor who had promised him weekend work stopped replying. The landlord left a reminder under the door. Grace's school asked for updated care instructions. The world did not fall apart all at once. It tightened, one paper at a time. By Friday, Daniel pawned a spare drill set for $72. At the grocery store, he counted every item in the cart. Chicken thighs, rice, carrots, onions, flour, and a small bag of apples for Grace. At the register, his card declined because an automatic payment had pulled from the account that morning. The woman behind him sighed. Daniel removed the apples and kept his face still. Grace noticed when he came home. She did not ask where the apples were. She only took the receipt, drew a tiny blue window on the back, and placed it beside his plate. That was the bottom, though nobody watching from outside would have recognized it. It was not dramatic. It was a father pretending he was not hungry so his daughter would finish the last of the rice. It was a shut-off notice under a salt shaker. It was a phone screen with no new work. It was a blue notebook full of warnings. Sitting beside bills Daniel could not pay. Near midnight, the refrigerator clicked one more time and went quiet. Daniel got up, pulled it from the wall, and opened his toolbox. Dust clung to the coils in gray ropes. The relay was weak. He could make it last a few more days if he was careful. As he worked on the floor, one loose page slipped from Mara's notebook and landed near his knee. It was a recipe. Mara's chicken stew, the one she made when neighbors were overwhelmed, when someone came home from the hospital, or when a family needed dinner but did not know how to ask. At the bottom, under the ingredients, she had written, "Feed people first, then help them fill out the forms." Daniel sat on the cold kitchen floor and read that line again. He did not have a job. He did not have influence. He did not have the money North Star wanted him to believe mattered most. But he still had Mara's recipe, and in the morning, that would be enough to start. Pastor Raymond Cole opened the back door of New Light Baptist at 6:05 on Saturday morning wearing sweatpants, a winter coat, and the tired look of a man who had answered the phone before coffee. The church sat near a laundromat and a check cashing place, with a fellowship hall that smelled like old hymnals, floor wax, and last week's coffee. Daniel stood outside with 2 grocery bags, Mara's notebook, and Grace asleep in the front seat of the van. "I can pay something," Daniel said. Pastor Raymond looked at the bags, then at Daniel's face. "You can fix the pantry freezer when it starts making that noise again." "It already is. Then we have a deal." The church kitchen was cold at first. Daniel turned on the lights, washed his hands twice, and set Mara's recipe on the counter. Grace woke up slowly and sat at a folding table with crayons while he chopped onions, peeled carrots, browned chicken, and measured rice. The stove clicked 3 times before catching. Soon the room smelled like broth, pepper, and the kind of food that made people remember being cared for. By 9:30, Daniel had 12 containers of stew lined up on the counter. He wrote a sign on cardboard, "Blue Window Stew, $5 if you can, free if you can't." Grace decorated the corners with blue windows. Pastor Raymond shook his head when he saw the free part, but he did not tell Daniel to change it. After the pantry line opened, people started asking about the smell. A woman from the choir bought 2 containers. A man from the laundromat bought one and came back for another. A grandmother took a free one and left 3/4 under the napkin when Daniel was not looking. By noon, all 12 were gone. After buying containers and ingredients, Daniel made $31. It should have felt too small to matter. Instead, He stood in the kitchen holding those folded bills and felt something inside him move. Not victory, not even hope, not yet, just proof that he was not completely still. That afternoon, Ruth Alvarez came into the kitchen carrying a folder under one arm. Ruth was a retired North Star nurse with silver hair, reading glasses, and a voice that made nonsense feel ashamed of itself. She had known Mara from community clinic work. She bought 2 containers and nodded toward the blue notebook on the counter. "That hers?" Ruth asked. Daniel placed one hand on the cover. Yes, she wrote everything down. She tried to. Ruth pulled out a chair. "Then maybe it's time somebody read it with you." For 2 hours, they went through Mara's notes page by page. Ruth recognized names, families, old codes, denials that had never made sense. She did not turn the notebook into a miracle, and Daniel was grateful for that. She treated it like what it was, a record kept by a careful woman who had noticed patterns before anyone powerful cared. "This one," Ruth said, tapping a page. "Bridge Fund, Donor Class 17. Daniel looked at the code. "They told me the fund was not available." Ruth's mouth tightened. Maybe it was not available to the people asking for it. On the second Saturday, Daniel made 28 containers. He sold 19, gave away 5, and traded 4 for pantry groceries. Profit after costs, $47. Grace made a better sign in blue marker. This time, it said Blue Window Table. The name stuck. People came first for the food. Then they came with envelopes. A mother brought a denial letter she did not understand. An older man brought a bill with 3 different phone numbers circled. Ruth helped them sort the papers while Daniel served stew and coffee. Pastor Raymond found an extra folding table. Grace placed crayons at the corner for children waiting with their parents. No one called it a movement. It was too small for that. It was just a table. But sometimes a table is the first place a person feels less alone. Daniel did not know that someone took a picture of the sign and posted it online. He did not know that a woman he once helped at a bus stop would see that picture later. He did not know that the woman's name was Claire Beaumont, CEO of North Star Health. All he knew was that by the end of the 3rd Saturday, there were 5 new names written in his notebook, $83 in a coffee can, and a line from Mara's recipe taped above the stove. Feed people first, then help them fill out the forms. The comeback grew slowly, the way real things do. It did not arrive with one viral post and a miracle check. It arrived in grocery receipts, permit forms, borrowed folding chairs, and Grace counting containers on the kitchen floor. Week 1, Daniel made $31. Week 2, $47. Week 3, $83. Week 4, after Eddie Colton fixed the van alternator for parts cost and a promise, Daniel made $112. Eddie ran a small garage 2 blocks from the church. His hands were always stained with oil, and he had a habit of pretending not to be kind. When Daniel asked how much he owed, Eddie pointed at Grace's blue sign and said, "Just bring my mother 2 containers when you cook next." Then he looked under the hood again so Daniel would not thank him too much. Ruth became the paperwork corner. Pastor Raymond became the key holder, coffee maker, and unofficial peacekeeper. Ms. Lorna Bell, Grace's teacher, started stopping by to help children with homework while parents filled out forms. A retired attorney named Eleanor Briggs offered 2 hours on Thursday afternoons after Ruth told her, "You can either complain about the system or come help us read it." By April, Blue Window Table had a rhythm. Saturday mornings began with stew and ended with stacks of paper sorted into piles. Missing document, wrong code, appeal needed, doctor letter, billing error, insurance gap. Daniel did not pretend to be a lawyer. He said that every time. But he knew how to read instructions, compare dates, and notice when a file had been marked incomplete even though the family had brought everything. That word became a pattern. Incomplete. Mrs. Clay's grandson had been marked incomplete because one signature was scanned sideways. The Santos family had been marked incomplete because an income form went into the wrong portal tab. Mr. Benson had been marked incomplete because he had no computer and missed an online message he never knew existed. Every story was different, but the feeling was the same. The door was open in theory, but the handle had been hidden. The first real setback came from the health department. An inspector named Mr. Tillman visited the church kitchen and explained that Daniel needed a revised temporary food permit, allergen labels, a thermometer, and separate storage bins if he planned to sell more than twice a month. He was polite and he was not wrong, but the costs hit hard. $85 for the permit, $22 for labels, $38 for storage bins, $14 for the thermometer. Daniel watched the coffee can shrink back down to $72. That night he almost stopped. Grace found him at the kitchen table staring at receipts. She climbed into the chair across from him and slid one of her drawings forward. It showed the blue window table with a line of people outside and a giant blue window above them all.
Mommy would say, "Keep going,"
Grace said. Daniel looked at the drawing. Mommy would also say, "We need better math." Grace smiled. "Then do both." So he did. He raised the stew price to $6 for those who could pay and kept the free sign for those who could not. He added pancakes because Ruth said people handled forms better with warm food. Paperwork and pancakes became the phrase people remembered. By the end of the month, 6 families had submitted appeals through the table. 2 were approved. 1 received a reduced bill. 1 finally got a call back from a hospital office after 7 weeks of silence. Daniel still had no answer for Grace's case. The second appeal came back with almost the same language as the first. Available support limited, eligibility incomplete. Daniel read the letter in his van outside Grace's school and sat so still the crossing guard knocked on the window. That evening, Dr. Lena Ortiz came to the church kitchen after sunset. She wore a navy coat and looked over her shoulder before stepping inside. "Mr. Carter," she said, "Grace's medical priority note was uploaded twice." Daniel wiped his hands on a towel. "Then why is it missing?" Dr. Ortiz hesitated. "My assistant found an attachment log. The note was removed from the review packet after our office submitted it." The kitchen seemed to go quieter. "Can you put that in writing?" Daniel asked. Her face answered before her words did. "Not yet. But request the full case audit file. Use those exact words." She handed him a sticky note. Daniel read it twice. Complete case audit file, including attachment log and fund allocation status. The next morning, he spent $9.68 to send the request by certified mail. He placed the receipt inside Mara's blue notebook. It was a small piece of paper. Easy to lose, easy to ignore. But Daniel was learning that small papers could become very heavy later. If you are still here, this is the part of the story where most people would have quit. Daniel had no steady job, no clear answer, and no guarantee that anyone powerful would ever listen. So, if you believe quiet people deserve to be heard before everything falls apart, subscribe to the channel and stay with us, because the next part is where the table in a church basement becomes a problem North Star can no longer ignore. Daniel met Claire Beaumont before he knew who she was. It happened at a bus stop on Broad Street on a wet Monday morning when his van refused to start again. He was carrying an empty cardboard box to a restaurant supply store, hoping to find cheaper containers. Claire stood under the shelter in a gray coat, trying to use the fare machine with a phone that had no battery and a purse with no cash. The bus driver was waiting. People behind her were getting irritated. Claire looked like a person used to solving problems quickly, but not this one. Daniel stepped forward and dropped $2.25 into the slot. She turned toward him. "You did not have to do that." "Already did," Daniel said. "I can pay you back. Somebody paid for me once. They rode 6 stops together." She asked what was in the box. He told her, hopefully cheaper soup containers. She almost smiled and said that sounded important. He said, "It is today." When she got off near North Star's corporate building, she asked his name. He said Daniel. She said hers was Claire. He did not know she was the CEO of the hospital group that had pushed him out. Claire did not know he was the father behind the file that had started appearing in internal messages as a reputational concern. 3 days later, she saw the blue window table online. A photo showed Daniel standing behind a folding table, Grace's blue sign taped to the front, Ruth helping a family sort papers in the background. Claire recognized the man from the bus. She clicked on the post, then another, then another. By midnight, she had read 23 comments from families describing rejected forms, lost documents, and calls that never came back. The next morning, Claire asked Victor Harlan why a former North Star technician was helping families appeal charity denials from a church assessment. Victor did not seem surprised. That was what bothered her. Daniel Carter has a personal grievance, Victor said. He is shaping sympathy around a private matter. Claire looked at the printed photo on her desk. Are the families wrong? Victor's answer came too quickly. That is not the issue. It is the issue I asked about. Victor adjusted his cuff. Charity care is complex. People misunderstand what they qualify for. If we respond emotionally every time someone goes online, we put the entire system at risk. There was that word again, system. Claire had spent her career trusting systems. She believed in structure, compliance, and measurable outcomes. She was not a soft person, and she did not apologize for that. But something about Daniel's bus fare stayed with her. He had helped a stranger when he had almost nothing. He had not asked who she was. He had not turned kindness into a transaction. That kind of detail did not fit easily into reports, but it mattered. Soon after, Channel 8 sent a reporter to Blue Window Table. Julia Raines was not famous, just persistent. She filmed the church kitchen, the cardboard sign, the families waiting with envelopes, and Grace taping drawings above the homework corner. She asked Daniel why he started the table. He could have spoken about Victor. He could have held up the denial letter. He could have tried to make himself the center. Instead, he said, "My wife believed people should be fed before they were asked to fight paperwork." The segment aired at 5:46 that evening. By the next morning, Blue Window Table had 8,700 followers and $1,480 in small donations. People dropped off rice, paper plates, stamps, printer ink, and grocery cards. A woman mailed 23 handwritten thank you notes from families Mara had once helped. One envelope contained only $5 and a line on a sticky note. "I was once the person who needed the free meal." North Star noticed. Paige Keller drafted a statement about misinformation and former employees misrepresenting complex policies. Victor reviewed it, removed 2 soft sentences, and added language about protecting patient privacy. Claire saw the draft and did not approve it. Instead, she requested the source files for the Children's Bridge Fund. Victor offered to summarize them personally. Claire replied, "Send the source files." That was the first time. Victor realized Claire was not simply managing a public relations problem. She was looking behind the panel, and people like Victor do not fear noise nearly as much as they fear someone quiet opening the right compartment. The legal letter arrived at Daniel's apartment on a Wednesday afternoon, folded inside a white envelope with North Star's logo in the corner. Grace was doing homework at the kitchen table. A pot of beans simmered on the stove. Daniel came upstairs from the mailbox with rain on his jacket and the envelope in his hand, already feeling the room change before he opened it. The letter accused him of misleading the public. It accused Blue Window Table of interfering with hospital operations. It accused him of using confidential information. It demanded that he stop helping families with North Star-related paperwork, remove public posts about denial problems, and return any hospital documents in his possession. At the end, it offered a private settlement discussion if he agreed to stop speaking publicly. Grace watched his face. "Is that about me?" Daniel folded the letter. "It is about them being uncomfortable. Did we do something wrong?" He looked at Mara's notebook on the counter. The old elastic band had finally broken, so Grace had tied it shut with a blue ribbon from a birthday gift. "No," he said, "we did not." The next morning, Daniel brought the letter to Eleanor Briggs at the church. She read it once, then read it again with a red pen in her hand. Ruth stood behind her with a coffee cup. Pastor Raymond leaned against the counter, silent. Eleanor tapped the second page. "They made a broad claim that can be useful." "How is that useful?" Daniel asked. "Because now they have to explain what they think you have." Daniel looked at the notebook. "My daughter's papers, public policies, Mara's notes. Then they may have turned a church table into a public interest story."
Julia Raines agreed.
She asked North Star for comment and aired a careful report 2 nights later. She did not accuse anyone of a crime. She simply showed the letter, North Star's public charity policy, and 2 families whose appeals had moved forward after Blue Window helped them correct file errors. The headline was simple: Hospital sends legal warning to father helping families with aid forms. By Saturday morning, the church parking lot was full. Victor watched the segment from his office with Paige standing nearby. Paige looked tense. The letter made him sympathetic. Victor kept his eyes on the screen. The letter made him exposed. It made him visible. Then we make him unreliable. That was Victor's next mistake. He believed reputation could be handled the way he handled budgets. Move pressure here. Reduce credibility there. Change the label, and the problem changes with it. Paige released a statement saying Northstar cared deeply about families, but warned that unqualified individuals could confuse sensitive processes. She did not name Daniel. She did not have to. The comments split fast. Some people defended him. Others asked why he had been removed from his job. A few said hospitals could not help everyone, and that Daniel was probably leaving something out. Daniel read 10 comments and closed the phone. Grace saw one before he could stop her. Someone said, "You just want money." Daniel knelt beside her chair. People say things when they do not know us, but it is not true. No, can we show them? She ran to her backpack and pulled out a drawing. It showed the blue window table, the church kitchen, Daniel stirring a pot, Ruth holding papers, and a long line of families standing under a giant blue window. At the bottom, Grace had written, "Light makes people less afraid." Daniel stared at the sentence. Mara had said that to Grace when she was little. But it was more than a family saying. Years earlier, Mara had used that same line in a donor brochure for the Children's Bridge Fund. Claire Beaumont found it 2 days later while reviewing old launch materials. Page 2 showed Mara Carter at a community clinic, standing beside a family with a stack of forms. Beneath the photo was the quote, "Light makes people less afraid." Claire sat alone in her office with the brochure open. Victor had told her Daniel was just a former contractor with a personal grievance, but Mara Carter had been part of the Bridge Fund's original outreach work. Her notebook was not random, it was connected to the fund's beginning. Claire turned the page and found the donor code BF17, the same code Daniel had requested in his case audit file. That was when the story moved from public pressure to hidden proof. Claire stopped asking Victor for summaries. That was when people on the executive floor began to notice something had changed. She requested archived donor reports, board minutes, fund restrictions, vendor contracts, review policies, and source files tied to the Children's Bridge Fund. Victor delayed twice. Claire replied both times with one word: today. The files arrived in a shared folder late Friday evening. There were more than 300 documents, most labeled in ways that made them look boring enough to discourage anyone from opening them. Claire ordered coffee, removed her jacket, and began reading. By midnight, she had found the first inconsistency. Public donor reports said the Children's Bridge Fund had received millions over several years to help children whose families could not cover certain medical costs. Internal reports showed large amounts moved into administrative categories, with names like outreach efficiency, review support, and community optimization services. One vendor appeared again and again, Vantage Path Consulting. On paper, it looked clean. That was the problem. It looked too clean. Claire searched board disclosures and found no clear warning attached to Vantage Path. She searched older email threads and saw Victor's name attached to every restructuring recommendation. She searched Mara Carter and found a small archive folder from years earlier. Inside was the donor brochure, outreach notes, and a list of families Mara had helped during the fund's first year. Many of the names matched the blue notebook. At the same time, Daniel received a message through the Blue Window website. It came from Owen Bell, a former Northstar fund manager. "I knew Mara Carter. If you have her notebook, some of the numbers may match files I kept.
I need to know I can trust you."
Daniel showed the message to Ruth and Sylvia. They agreed to meet Owen at a public library near Forest Hill Avenue. Owen arrived in a brown coat, carrying a small black hard drive in a padded envelope. He was careful with every movement, like a man who had spent years looking over his shoulder without wanting to admit it. "Mara asked questions before anyone else," Owen said. She noticed families being told the fund was unavailable, while donor reports still showed money assigned to pediatric hardship cases. Daniel's hand tightened on the notebook. Why didn't she tell me? She may have wanted proof first. Owen explained that the fund had not vanished in one obvious move. It had been rerouted piece by piece, hidden inside categories that sounded responsible. Review support, administrative alignment, vendor analysis. The language was clean enough that board members could approve it without seeing the families behind it. I objected, Owen said. My role was eliminated 3 months later. Eleanor leaned forward. What is on the drive? Allocation sheets, draft reports, email chains, enough to show the public reports and internal movements do not match. Daniel placed Mara's notebook on the library table and opened to the page with BF17. Owen stared at the code, then turned another page, then another. His face changed. These are donor batch numbers, he said softly. And case codes. Mara was matching families to restricted funds. He pushed the hard drive toward Daniel. Back at North Star, Maya Lopez, Dr. Ortiz's assistant, made her own decision. She had been quiet for months, saving screenshots of upload logs, because something in her knew silence was not the same as safety. When Claire came to pediatrics and asked how often priority notes disappeared from review packets, Maya answered before Dr. Ortiz could protect her. More than they should, she said. Then she opened the folder. Timestamps, missing attachments, review packet edits after clinical submission. Grace Carter's file showed the same pattern. Dr. Ortiz's priority note had been uploaded. Then it was removed before financial review. Claire looked at the screen for a long time. Victor's final mistake came from arrogance under pressure. In a closed meeting, he told 2 finance managers and Paige that if Daniel had Mara's notebook, it was emotional material, not evidence. One finance manager remembered the phrase and later repeated it to Claire. Emotional material. That was Victor's blindness in 2 words. He believed evidence had to come from his system to count. He did not understand that Mara's notebook held what his system had tried to separate: names connected to numbers, families connected to funds, promises connected to paper trails. By Wednesday morning, Claire called Daniel. Mr. Carter, she said, this is Claire Beaumont. Daniel was in the church kitchen, holding a sack of onions. The Claire from the bus? There was a pause. Yes, and the CEO of North Star Health. Daniel closed his eyes. Claire continued, I think it is time we talk about Grace's file. And your wife's notebook. The public hearing was scheduled for 7 in the morning, early enough that North Star probably hoped the room would be half empty. By 6:20, every seat was taken. Families came with folders on their laps. Nurses stood along the walls before their shifts. Donors sat in the front rows looking stiff and uneasy. Julia Raines set up a camera near the back. Pastor Raymond arrived with Ruth, Sylvia, Eddie, Miss Lorna Bell, and Grace, who wore a blue dress under her coat because she said the notebook should not be the only blue thing in the room. Daniel wanted Grace to stay home, but she refused. This is about me too, she said. He could not argue with that. Victor Harlan did not sit at the main table. That detail told the room more than any announcement could have. He sat in the 3rd row, wearing a gray suit and holding a folder he barely opened. Paige Keller sat near the aisle. Claire Beaumont took her seat at the front and looked out at the room with a face that did not invite easy forgiveness. We are here, Claire said, to establish facts, correct failures, and determine accountability regarding the Children's Bridge Fund. Dr. Lena Ortiz spoke first. She explained the medical priority process, the review packet, and why certain notes were supposed to travel with a child's file. Her voice stayed steady until she reached Grace's case. Then she paused, looked at Daniel, and said, the note was submitted. It should not have been removed. Maya Lopez came next. She showed the upload logs. She did not raise her voice. She did not use dramatic language. She let the timestamps speak. A document uploaded at 8:14 a.m., a packet edited at 10:03. An attachment missing before review. The room grew quieter with every line. Then Owen Bell stepped forward with the hard drive. On the screen behind him, spreadsheets appeared: donor batches, restricted funds, internal transfers, vendor invoices, Vantage Path Consulting. The details were dry, but the meaning was not. Money given for children's hardship cases had been moved through categories most families would never know how to question. A donor in the front row whispered, "That is not what we funded." Claire turned to Daniel. "Mr. Carter." Daniel stood with Mara's notebook in his hands. Every step to the table felt longer than it should have. He was aware of the lights, the cameras, the rain tapping the windows, and Grace watching him from the front row. He placed the notebook beside the microphone and opened to the first page. "My wife, Mara, worked with families who got lost in systems," he said. "She believed people should not have to know the right person to receive help that was already promised." He turned the pages slowly. The scanned version appeared on the screen, but Daniel asked to hold the original. He wanted the room to see the worn cover, the soft corners, the blue ribbon Grace had tied around it. This was not just a file. It was something carried through kitchens, waiting rooms, bus rides, and long nights. "These are names," Daniel said. "Dates, case codes, donor numbers, missed calls. Families told their applications were incomplete when they were not. My daughter's file was one of them." He looked toward the board, not toward Victor. That mattered. Daniel had not come to fight one man. He had come to make the truth visible in a room where it could no longer be edited. "I was offered $5,000 to sign a statement saying I caused a workplace problem," he said. "I refused because the statement was false. Later, Northstar sent me a legal letter suggesting that my wife's notebook and my daughter's papers were improper for me to have." He placed one hand on the blue cover. "This notebook was not stolen," Daniel said. "It was kept. There is a difference." The applause began in the back, from a nurse in green scrubs. Then another person joined, then another. It was not loud at first. It rose slowly, like people standing up from a long silence. Claire stood after him. "Effective immediately, Northstar will restore restricted funds to direct patient assistance, freeze related vendor contracts, and create an independent family review panel. Grace Carter's case has been approved for immediate scheduling." Grace covered her mouth with both hands. Ruth put an arm around her. Daniel lowered his head for just a second. Claire continued. "Mr. Harlan has been removed from financial authority pending formal review." Victor stood. "This is being framed unfairly." For the first time, the room looked at him the way he had made other people feel, measured, watched, and not automatically believed. He looked from the board to the screen to the blue notebook on the table. His reports had numbers. Mara had names. His files had categories. Daniel had proof those categories had touched real families. Victor had spent months trying to reduce Daniel Carter to a problem. In the end, Daniel became the person who showed everyone where the real problem had been hiding. 3 months later, the blue cart still rolled unevenly because Eddie never fully fixed the left front wheel. Grace said that was fine because perfect things were boring. She had more energy in her steps by then, more color in her face, and a new habit of telling adults where to place chairs for Blue Window Saturdays as if she had been managing volunteers for years. Her procedure had gone well, but Daniel did not turn that into a public speech. Some things were too private for cameras. He thanked Dr. Ortiz. He thanked Maya. He thanked Ruth until Ruth told him she would start charging by the compliment. Then he took Grace home, made grilled cheese cut into triangles, and placed Mara's blue notebook on the table between them. Grace touched the ribbon around it. "Mommy helped, didn't she?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, she did, and you helped." "A lot of people helped, but you started with Stu." Daniel smiled. "I guess I did." Blue Window Table did not become a giant company. It became something better. With donations, restored grant money, and a new partnership Northstar could no longer control. From behind closed doors, the church fellowship hall became a family resource room twice a week. Ruth trained volunteers. Eleanor reviewed appeal language. Pastor Raymond kept the coffee strong. Miss Lorna Bell ran the homework corner. Eddie kept the blue cart alive with tape, screws, and pride. Daniel accepted a new role as Director of Family Access Partnerships, not an executive role, not a polished title designed for a press release. A real job in a small office between the hospital lobby and the social work department. The office had 2 chairs, a desk, a coffee maker that made terrible coffee, and Grace's drawing on the wall. Claire visited on the first morning. She stood beside Daniel and watched a grandmother learn how to upload a document to the portal.
I used to think access meant having a policy,
Claire said. Daniel looked toward the waiting families. A policy is only a door. Somebody still has to help people find the handle. Claire nodded. Mara knew that. Daniel looked at the glass case mounted on the wall. Inside was Mara's blue notebook, open to the first page. No family should have to apologize for needing help. Beside it was a small sign Grace had written herself. The letters leaned slightly, just like the first blue window sign. Some things cannot be measured on paper. Victor never came into that room. But one morning, Daniel saw him across the street from the hospital entrance. No polished folder, no assistant, no confident expression. Just a man standing near the curb, looking through the glass doors at families walking toward the resource room. Daniel did not cross the street. Victor did not wave. There was nothing left to say that the room had not already said. Powerful people often believe they own the story because they own the forms. They trust contracts, titles, signatures, and reports because those things can be filed, stamped, and shown on a screen. But there are other records in this world. A child's drawing kept in a backpack, a recipe written at the bottom of a page, a bus fare paid for a stranger, a name remembered when a system forgot it, a notebook carried through the hardest season of a family's life. Those things do not always look powerful at first, but sometimes they are the only things that last. On the first anniversary of Blue Window Table, Daniel arrived at New Light Baptist before sunrise. The fellowship hall was dark. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee, onions, and old steam in the walls. He turned on the lights tied on the blue apron Grace had painted with a crooked white window and opened Mara's recipe page. Feed people first, then help them fill out the forms. Grace came in behind him carrying a stack of clean containers. "Daddy," she said, "how many today?" Daniel looked at the sign-up sheet. 112 meals, 23 paperwork appointments, 6 new families. Grace placed the containers on the counter and smiled. "We better start." So they did. Daniel chopped onions. Grace labeled lids. Ruth arrived with her griddle. Pastor Raymond unlocked the pantry. Eddie came in complaining about the cartwheel. Miss Lorna Bell set up the homework table. Outside, families began forming a line under the pale morning light, and above the serving table, in a simple wooden frame, hung Grace's newest drawing. A small blue window, wide open. The lesson is simple, but it is not easy. A person's worth is not decided by a paycheck, a title, a denial letter, a contract, or a report written by someone who never looked them in the eye. Sometimes the thing that saves a family is the very thing powerful people ignored because it looked too small to count. So here is the question. If someone tried to erase your truth with paperwork, then came back only after everyone else finally saw your value, would you forgive them or let them live with what they chose? Tell us what you would do in the comments. And if this story moved you, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because the next story is about another ordinary person who had nothing on paper but carried something no one could take away.